Hello.
Hello.
So, hi, everybody. Thank you for coming out today. I'm really excited to have my father up here today. He's a very special guest, and well, we have a lot to discuss with you. Growing up with him, he's a cyberpunk writer, if you didn't know that, one of the grandfathers of cyberpunk science fiction, and he has also written multiple nonfiction books about the fourth dimension, infinity, chaos theory, all the cool higher thoughts, mathematical, trippy stuff that people like to think about. So growing up, that was just commonplace in my house, and we've always had fun conversations together, and especially a lot of our conversations center around nature and being outside together and seeing all these phenomenon together out there. And I just thought I would bring them here and share one of our conversations. We have kind of a loose plan, but we don't totally have a firm time.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah. We've kind of been bouncing some ideas together. So, but I thought I'd kick it off with talking about these paintings behind us. And do you want to kick off anything before I kick that off?
Well, an interesting thing that Isabel's into these days, and I appreciate that, it's not something I'd thought of, is that there's many kinds of time. And we're sort of drummed into us by our science classes that time is a series of numbers that you measure on a clock or a digital readout, and that's all it is. It's just that series of numbers. And Isabel is exploring the idea of lots of different kinds of time. And you can tell us about that, Isabel.
Yeah, so thanks to Anne Beck and the Larry Spring Museum and Maureen McKeating, they've been working on this Redwood Time Project, and they're reimagining. There's a timeline. Downtown Fort Bragg, California has this huge old growth redwood round that a slice from an ancient one. I mean, I think it's, I don't know, 1,000 years old, or is a seedling in 190, so it's like yeah, 1,700 years old. And on that round, for fun, for tourists, many years ago, they put a little timeline with a few events, but they started thinking, how can we rethink this timeline? What else happened? And then they started exploring other ideas of time within that. And so that kind of kicked off my little time painting series I have behind us. And I started doing these illustrations of time. And I sat down and I started thinking of all these different times that exist in the world, and all of them happening at once and working together. And I came up with this what I'm starting to work on, this project called the time ecosystem. And they're all happening simultaneously in an ecosystem. Kind of like when I was little in science class, we were taught that trees are always in competition, trying to outgrow each other. And then just in the past decade or so, there's been this whole new conversation of, wait, they're not competing, they're actually in community, they're working together, they're all happening at once in one ecosystem. So I kind of have taken that idea with all the different concepts of time that are all happening at once. And so that's what we wanted to talk about.
It's in your head, there's a lot of different kinds of time. It's the things you remember. We also want to talk a little about the fourth dimension, and sometimes the fourth dimension is thought of as time. We can think of it as lots of other things too. But just thinking back over how you got here today, it's sort of a four-dimensional stack of moments where you got out of the car, you were walking down the street, you were saying hello to your friends. And in your mind, you have all those images of your past selves. And when you take that together, that's a kind of a four-dimensional thing, because we have the dimension of time. But then Isabel also talks about bumblebee time and slug time, which is interesting. And 5 minutes go by and the bumblebee, has beat its wings, 1,000 times. And the slug sort of hasn't done anything, it's just sitting there. So in a way, when you're younger, you're more like the bumblebee, and your 4 years of high school seem like a century, you know, and when you're old, 4 years, I mean, is it already 4 years later? It's so there's the speed of time is an interesting thing. You get into these paradoxical things about time, and thinking of other people's notion of time, where are they in a hurry? Are they not in a hurry? And that's something I like that Isabel is talking about. We're getting some feedback. I think, is that the two?
Oh, maybe I was too close. I think that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely different speeds of time. I've been thinking about how we have abstract concepts of time, so something like the fourth dimension, and then we have a whole group of times that are what I would consider organic times. So you have your tree rings growing each year. You have your migrations of the whales and the birds and the butterflies. Those are like organic movements, and they vary. You have your what else is behind us? Oh, the super deep time, which is like a rock cycle, and how long it takes for a rock to grow up out of the earth. So you kind of have your organic times, and then you have your abstract ones. Like besides the fourth dimension, you have parallel time. You have that painting right there, I call expansion, and that's just my own made up time one, where you imagine yourself in the center of that point. You're at the center point, and energy and light is coming from all directions from you, but perhaps one of those energies is time. So there's all these different times, past, present, different versions of time. And then of course there's the present moment.
This, if you think of the world as a space-time collection, where you've got all the minutes of the past and the present and the future, and in a way you have a sort of immortality there, because yourself, you know, in 2000 will always be there. And whether or not, what was I talking about? Just slinging the bullshit as fast as I can. I'm a science fiction writer, and the secret of science fiction is pile on the bullshit and keep a straight face. So,
Throw in a black hole, maybe. But yeah, but anyway, so we could talk about the hypercube behind me. I mean, maybe we should get down to business here and talk about the fourth dimension a
well,
little
people
bit.
do want to know about the fourth dimension.
They do want to know about it. People ask me, they say, what's the fourth dimension?
I first heard about the
I mean,
fourth
how
dimension.
can you even, I don't know. You know.
When I was about 12, I read a science fiction story that mentioned it. And then I thought, you know, I want to know what the fourth dimension is. So I've written two nonfiction books about the fourth dimension, and then a novel called Spaceland, about a guy who goes into the fourth dimension. And we say the fourth dimension, but we use it for all sorts of things. We can use it for time, but we can also use it for the idea of a parallel world, where, you know, there's a universe just like ours, but it's right next door, and it's a little bit different. And the difference between them. And it's handy to have the fourth dimension, because that's the direction we can't point in. We feel like there could be another direction, but we can't point in it. One way of thinking about the fourth dimension that I like, sometimes if you go to the ocean, you'll notice pelicans diving for fish. Have you ever seen them do that? They hover and then dive straight down with their beak. Now, I used to scuba dive a lot, and when you're under the water and you look up at the surface just looks like a mirror, this undulating mirror. So you're a fish, and there's this peaceful undulating mirror, and then this beak comes right through comes out of the mirror, you know. It's sort of a scary science fiction notion. And that's something coming at you from the fourth dimension. And so often there's a tendency, we think the fourth dimension is spooky, and the things that come from there might not be good. But then there's also the idea that the afterlife could be in the fourth dimension. We could have these nice, your parents could be looking down at you like loving stars of grace, you know, and your lost ones, they could be just a breath away, just on your pillow next to you, but just a gossamer distance away from you. So that's another kind of fourth dimension. And this drawing Isabel did there's a geometrical fourth dimension where we start with a zero-dimensional point, and if we move it along, we get a segment. Then you move that segment, and you get a square, and then you move the square in the third dimension, and you get a cube. And so, why not move it in this other direction, the fourth dimension? And when you're drawing a cube, you draw the extra dimension as an angle. And to draw the hypercube, we draw a cube and then move it along. You move it along in a different angle, and then you get this cool looking thing called the hypercube. And you can sort of see cubes inside Isabel's hypercube. And sometimes it's called a tesseract. And there was a popular book for children that had tesseracts in it. But Isabel?
How do you think there's the concept of parallel time, and in thinking about all these different times, there's like this concept of everything I do here is happening in a parallel world, same time, and there could be multiple parallel worlds. There's also like a very simple, like taking a very like straightforward parallel time, like you and I were going through the day at the same time, side by side. But how would parallel time relate to the fourth dimension, or you get there through the fourth dimension, or
Well, one nice illustration of the fourth dimension, when you think about your house, you know where everything is. So you have a funny image of your house because you know what's in all the drawers, and you know what's in the closets, and you know where everything's stored. So you have this complete image of the full three-dimensional house, including all of its contents. So if you're in the fourth dimension and you were looking at the house, you would see it that way. Now, to have the parallel world, I don't like the idea of parallel worlds, really. I think it's a waste. Because to me, it's a popular thing now, the multiverse. In any movie, when they've ruined the plot and there's huge contradictions that doesn't work, then they're like, oh, it's a multiverse. We're going to go over there. And it's just a piece of crap, because, our universe as it is fabulous and just unbelievably perfect and complex and intricate. And then if you want to say, oh, there's all the possible universes exist, and this is just a roll of a die that created us, I think that's kind of, it's like spitting on the gift.
Is it cheap, you think? Like kind of
It's just throwing it away. Here's this jewel-like fascinating thing that we have, and to say it's just some cheap-ass dice rolled somewhere. No, it has a logos. It has a meaning. The universe has a meaning, and I think it's a mistake to belittle it and say that there are multiverses. I'm happy with just one universe. And it's just so, the universe itself, you talk about the now moment, it's the now moment of time. It's such a rich, beautiful thing. And it's in all the dimensions. You can sort of see it at all these different levels. The tiny little bacteria racing around and doing their things very rapidly. And then if you take a slow picture of the Earth, you would just see it's like moving, like a face changing its expression. The landscape's moving around, the mountains, the ranges going forward and backwards. And if you think it'll speed it up more, and you've got the galaxies just darting around and doing things to each other, it's this many multi-leveled, which it's not exactly a dimension, but you could think of scale as a dimension. I've sometimes done that. So we could have the small, the big, the large. So there's different things that are sort of happening at the same time, but the time is so deep and so different. So I think it's enough to give the universe some respect and pay attention to what we have. To want a multiverse, it's sort of like what people used to do with whales. They build these huge machines to broadcast signals out to stars far away. Could we discover something intelligent there? And meanwhile, we've got these whales here, their brains are bigger than ours, they talk, they have social life. And What are we doing? We're killing them to put oil in like a lamp, to make dog food.
Yeah, you're out there looking for aliens. You got them migrating right by here.
Yeah, they're right here, and we're making very little effort. But Isabel showed me this wonderful new book called "Can You Speak Whale?" or "Learning to Speak
Or
Whale."
Whale speak? I can't remember.
I think it's "Learning to Speak
Tom
Whale."
Munzel, something.
And it's nice.
How to speak whale.
They're using how to speak. Yeah, they're using the latest AI. That stuff that you're always hearing about now. This new kind of AI, large language model, and they're using it on whale speech to figure out how to speak with whales. And this is, it's giving respect to the world as we have it.
Yeah.
Because we've got all the dimensions here.
Yeah.
If you want dimensions, look at Hilbert space.
What's
Quantum
that?
mechanics is based on Hilbert space, which is infinite dimensional space. So really, if you're doing physics right, we've got infinite dimensional space with these wave functions moving around. So there's a lot more than just four.
Yeah. No, totally.
So how's that for piling on the bullshit?
I like it. I've heard some of that before, by the way. Touch of it. I always like to hear a rant about the multiverse. It's good. And appreciation of our universe. For sure. Well, I mean, I think that all of this, what you're saying also leads to what I was saying about the time ecosystem, the simultaneous time, the whales were just in general, all this communal, everything working together. And I think it's been fun for me to consider an abstract thing like time as being an ecosystem, because I spend a lot of time in the outdoors, so I generally think of it very like looking at plants in a solid world. So it's kind of fun to use your mind in a different way.
I share that with Isabel. She mentioned we both really love nature, and you go out and it's just over and over, it always overwhelms me, the richness. And there's these nice little creatures under the bark that are racing around and leading whole lives, and we're not judging their lives and saying what they're doing is wrong, they shouldn't be holding their feeler at that angle,
Yeah, and then there's the stars above us. That's one of the time categories. We were talking about astronomical time, and there's the sun and the moon and how the stars move together. Our solar system is moving. When you have your birthday every year, you think, oh, I'm going back to my, one more trip around the sun. Somebody likes to say to you, enjoy your next year around the sun. And so I always felt the sense of security. I'll be back in the same place every year on my birthday. And then I went to that Griffith Observatory in LA. Is that what, and they had this little video of our solar system. And yeah, we were the Earth is going around predictably, but then it turns out, no, I'm not going back to the same spot. Our whole solar system is always doing this ever forward helix through the universe. So no, you never get to go back in time. You never get to go to the same place. And I started thinking of that too, that one of these paintings right behind me is a helix, kind of a spring form, and that's what that is. It's just this constant forward motion of time.
It's a good thing I've always liked to think about, because you'll think I'm going in a circle, I'm repeating myself, I'm going back to the same place. But in fact, time is going on and you're moving to new levels. I mean, it looks like I'm coming back to where I started, but I'm doing it with more awareness. I'm at a higher level. Mm-hmm. You're repeating yourself, but you're getting wiser while you're doing it. And that's thanks to the fourth dimension.
Yeah. And then, I also was thinking about, so there's like mechanical time, and that's what, in general, when we think of time, there's clocks and watches, and we've constructed mechanical time to keep a nice capitalist society very cohesive, the whole world working together.
Punch the clock.
Yeah, punch the clock, and it's like somewhat related to sky time, but it's our own measurements. And so, you become totally connected to that, and also linear time, which is like a calendar. There's like the past, now, and the future, and so the whole world is connected to mechanical and linear time. And in general, that's all we think about. But then I started thinking about this new term we keep using, screen time. and I was thinking about how screen time is somewhat mechanical because we're using a machine, but it's not actually the time ticking. And I started thinking about how we we stare at our screen, and all of a sudden there's this complete disappearance of spatial and time and body awareness. Like it's like this complete disappearance. It's just wild. Like I don't know if anything else does that to us really, and it just completely hypnotizes us. You'll see somebody walking down the street, all this stuff's going on, and they're just like completely absorbed by this screen time.
Screen time.
And so I started wondering, I was like, well, is that the same as present moment? Because you're just like totally in that moment. But then I thought, no, because you're not aware.
It's
like
zero dimensional.
Maybe it's like a no moment, you know? It's just this weird new concept that most of us we've had our cell phones maybe like 15 years or whatever. It's completely transformed society, this whole new time zone that we're all living in. And it's so fascinating. It's like we can't look away. I kind of equate it to like how much we love to stare at a flickering campfire. Like it just draws us in, and we just love staring at it. And there's something about that flicker, and everything falls away. So I don't know what that time zone is. It's new. We're exploring it. We'll get back to you. But I did start comparing that to present moment theory. You know, we've all heard of the present moment, try to live in the moment, and it's a wonderful like meditation practice. You know, there is no past, there is no future, there's only now. And but I've tried some of that, and thinking about the present moment is a totally different feeling I get than staring at a screen.
Yeah,
so.
no, and the fire is very different too.
Yeah.
Because the fire is chaotic, and the screen isn't chaotic.
It's that way though that our eye is like captivated by staring at something.
Another thing about society and time is this thing that a lot of us don't like, which is jumping forward and backwards to daylight savings time and not daylight savings time. And they just started doing that not all that long ago, and now they act like we need to do it. And what's happening to those hours that they're snatching away from you, you know? They claim they're giving it back to you, but you know, while they had the hour, they were drawing interest on it, you know?
Yeah, we were wondering about that today.
They've got like 48 seconds
like
that they owe
daylight
you.
savings is Sunday. It's in 2 days, so we start talking about that. We're like, where is that extra time? Like, when death comes for me, can I be like, well, hold up, dude, you gotta wait like X amount of hours.
You gotta redeem my 48 seconds.
Yeah, I gotta redeem my interest. I don't know if we get that back or not. I once flew on a plane on actual leap day, and then I went to a totally different time zone. I was like, I don't even know how many hours I gained or lost, because it's overnight flight on leap year day, but...
Wow.
That's a tangent there. Yeah.
Sure, Ann.
What about the concept of time as fiction?
So Anne just asked, what about the concept of time as fiction? Speaking as a fiction writer, can you comment on that?
Well, when you write a novel, you make a lot of decisions. Should it be first person? That's one way. It's like you're just the I, and you're a character, and you're talking as the I the whole time. And then I've actually gone back to doing that. Sometimes when you're starting, you do that, and then people say that's kind of childish, but it's a nice way to do it. And then there's the issue of the time. You can tell it in the past tense. You could say somebody's like he's sitting around the campfire and telling you about all the things that happened to him, you know. And or you can tell it in present time, like when somebody's narrating a movie to you. That's the tense they use. They say, okay, you go in there, and there's this giant lobster, and then the giant lobster runs out, and you run after it, and you're in a tank, and it's sort of present tense, which is also a nice way to narrate. And then there's the mechanical trick that you do of jumping into a flashback of you want to do the backstory on what happened, and then so you can jump to whole sections. So there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that if you do it right, people hardly even notice it when they're reading it, you know. But when you're writing a book, I just wrote a novel, and I went back to having it be a man is talking in the present tense, like he's writing it down, and then he's an unsuccessful science fiction writer, and he's old, and he's living in like a shipping container in the South Bay, and
You're a little better off than that.
well, it's a novel. You got to make it more dramatic. He made some bad investments, and then. But then it turns out he's actually writing this novel that we're reading. So he's the science fiction writer. People are saying, you're saying, I wonder what happens next. I said, well, you're writing the fucking book. You decide, make it be something good.
Make your life better.
Yeah, make it better.
Write it better.
So I had fun doing that.
That is. What's the name of this new book?
Well, there's a thing that's like a lizard, and it's called a skink. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I have heard of this skink.
But I didn't want to use that, but I like that word. So I made it skink with a Q. S-Q-I-N-K. And these are these creatures. They're sort of from the fourth dimension, because there's this thing that they use in physics. They say the space we live in is called the universe, but then there's all this crap next to us, and they call that the bulk. Like we're the surface of a hypersphere. What's inside it? Oh, that's the bulk. Oh, okay. You've explained everything now.
Yeah, I mean.
And then another thing I like in 40s science fiction. When you want to bring in some weird creatures, you say they're from the subdimensions. You can't argue with that, It just sounds great, the subdimensions. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean anything, but it sounds like it means something.
So these are the skinks in the book?
The skinks, they could be from the subdimensions, but I think they're from the bulk. But they're, I'm going back to one of my favorite tropes. One of my first novels, Software. I was just talking to this guy here, and they were eating people's brains. The robots. They wanted to get the data out of people, so they would cut the top off their heads and then eat it with a spoon. Eat the brains, brain eaters, and that's what they're doing now with large language models in a way, having it like devour everything you've said. But
yeah, that's actually a good.
Yeah, but the skinks, they're back to doing that. But instead of eating your brain, they put it in a cuddle warmer, and they put that down in this place called Tiny Town. And your brain waits down there, and then the skink crawls inside your skull, and he drives your body around for a while.
And you're going to be publishing that this year?
Somebody's going to be publishing it. It might be me.
Right on. Yeah, he's been working on this for a couple of years, so it was exciting.
Yeah, the thing about screen time, it just reminded me, I had a friend who's a programmer, and he said when I'm working on a program, I'm so intensely into it, and I don't get anything else done because all I ever want to do is work on the program. It's sort of like being a drug addict. Don't have time for anything else because you've got to do this over and over. Mm-hmm. And also writing a novel is like that too. When you get really into it, it just eats at you, and you've got to fix it, and you don't have time to do anything. It's been months since I did anything around the house. I just had to go pound on it some more. But now
now you're free.
Now I'm free, and so I started writing my blog posts again.
Yeah. And he also paints. For those of you that don't know, he has some prints of his paintings inside. He's done hundreds of paintings in the last 20 years. After he stopped teaching at San Jose State, he started painting, and most of the paintings are illustrations of a lot of these concepts or characters in his books, or some are just nature paintings, but a lot of creatures, perhaps a UFO.
We're sort of like those medieval people where everybody in the family was an artist, So I've got Isabel the Younger.
Yeah, we got a whole magic trailer box of tricks here.
Uh-huh.
Isabel, I'm thinking you must have heard some wild bedtime stories.
Yeah, I guess I did.
Sometimes I'd make them up, yeah.
I mean, we could have a whole another talk about fractals too. You were big into that at one point, but we won't go there right now. Fractals are great, but
they're from the subdimensions.
Yeah. I mean, I guess one of the last times I would bring up, perhaps related to growing up in family, is I was thinking about another organic timeline that we talk about is generations, like family I just started thinking of all these different timekeeping methods we have as a society, and one of the timekeeping methods is a generation. So I say, oh, my great-great-grandfather, and you kind of have an idea in your head what that means. So I just started thinking about all these ways before we had all these mechanical timekeepings, and then we still use them all, but
oral tradition,
ways we can mark time.
family stories.
Yeah. But yeah, any other time things we should?
How long have we been talking?
I don't know. Half hour.
Half hour.
Q&A or
Sort
got
of
any
cold,
more?
yeah.
Got any more?
You want to hit us with any
Does
questions?
anybody have any questions?
We're getting cold, so.
Is there ever no time?
Is there ever enough time?
no time?
No time.
No time.
Is there ever no time?
Well, that's when you want to get. It's this sort of the idea of getting totally into the now, be zoned out, be spaced out. That's sort of when you take a nap. Naps are good.
Or
'cause
Patty's a painter, so maybe when you're in your full flow of your painting,
well, you're in the zone,
it's kind of present
You don't feel any
moment.
pressure. You're just doing it, and yeah.
You're not keeping track of it.
Yeah.
No,
You're not
you don't
keeping
know
track.
how long you painted.
Mhm.
It's nice when it's like that.
Yeah. Anybody else have a question?
There are genuine alternate states like that, where a person can perform and share like a downhill skier or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're doing some athletic thing and skiing, good example of that, and you're just in that, you're not there, you're almost not there, you're just in it.
Some people make music like that.
Yes, music also.
Oh, totally,
very much
music
so.
for sure. Yeah.
Well, that's one where we do these things is we want to forget ourselves. That's why I do art or write, because I like to forget myself and just be in the process and forget that I'm alive. Because if I do that, then I'm not remorseful and I'm not anxious and I'm not, longing for anything.
Or you are alive, but in a different way.
Yeah, it's your real life in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, I mean, I think too. I'm not going to go there, but I would just say these days, it's
That's
never
all
been,
you need to say.
It's never been more important. It's never been more important to make art and music, and write your poetry and share your writing and just keep thriving. That was one reason I wanted to do this talk. Is I wanted to give people something else to think about and talk about, some higher thought, remind ourselves that we have these amazing brains and we live in this wonderful
Right.
universe, and it's totally all these different layers and interesting things we can do.
And the size of it.
You just keep thriving through art and
Yeah.
music and writing.
And the tininess of our worries compared to the vastness of the universe and the number of levels and
totally.
the amount of time and the amount of space. And, don't get hung up on just the latest.
No, look, dude,
Whatever.
we're not going there.
We're not going there.
We're talking about art
We're
and
with
the
the
universe.
infinite, dude. We're in
higher
the
math.
sub-dimensions.
We're
Yeah.
talking about the whales
The
singing
fourth
to us.
dimension. The fifth dimension.
Those whales are going by. I love them. Actually, one last thing before we wrap up. Just a thought, as I was kind of wondering what whales think about time and dimensions, but just something to ponder about. Like, they're so smart and they have these cultures. What's going on with them? And
they sort of don't have space because you go to sleep and you wake up and, you're 20, 100 miles away from where you were. So you don't have this idea of this fixed space that we have.
I know they
this
don't have a
Euclidean
house.
world.
It's always moving.
There's no address.
No possessions.
But they are on a schedule.
They're totally on a schedule.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta sense the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I want to let everybody know, inside I have this zine I made. You can go in and get one for free.
17 Kinds of Time by Isabel Rucker.
It's 17 and counting. I realized
There's more.
I didn't include synchronicity, and today I thought of limbic time. I was like, oh my, so this is first draft. You can get it now. It'll be first edition.
The first of infinite
Yeah, it's going to be
amount.
worth a lot. It's free now. And definitely,
We have some books to sell.
Def-
We have some images to sell.
Yeah.
Isabel has some paintings in there to sell.
and if you have any amount to donate to this museum, even $1, $5, $10, $100, anything. Grants are all being cut off these days, and this
Oh.
museum is a real hub of beauty and joy. It's basically a laboratory for alternative thought and artwork and just cool, fun things. So please donate anything you can to that box. And we'll be inside if you want to chat some more.
All right.
Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for coming. It was really nice to share with you all.